Hello and welcome to the Cardboard Herald podcast. I am Eric, along here with Jack.
That's me.
That's him.
That's me.
We're rocking the backwards caps today.
Coordinated.
Coordinated. We definitely did this, not intentionally. I didn't go put on a backwards hat to look cool with the youths when I saw you were wearing a backwards hat. We both just happened to have backwards hats on.
Yes. My visuals look awful yellow in here. It's kind of dusky compared to the more white balanced room in which you're rocking. How are you feeling about that?
It's actually quite interesting because all of my lights are yellow. Every light that I own is yellow, so maybe my camera has just gotten used to it, gotten accustomed to it. You don't look that yellow on my end of it.
Okay.
But, well, what it is.
We can rock it. It's some mood lighting. I think it's because it's the end of the year, and we're just kind of vibing. Or I guess it's the beginning of the new year. We're in 2025.
We are in 2025. Throw the confetti. We're here. We're celebrating the new year. In the new year, have you played anything interesting so far?
So far in the new year, I played a couple of games. I played some Draw Polter and Harvest. That was
awesome.
Pretty cool. I had a buddy up who had moved to Texas and has been going to all the BGG cons down there and everything. But he was back up for the holidays, so got to show him some stuff. He became obsessed with River of Gold. He was like, Jack, we're going to play more of this. And
that makes sense. It's an awesome game.
Yes. I don't think he liked Harvest as much because he lost at Harvest, but, River of Gold, he completely smoked Christina and I. But the things that I've been playing that are, particularly the most interesting are Rear Window. Have you seen this game, a modern board game adaptation of the classic Alfred Hitchcock movie?
I feel like I've seen it at Target, and it looks like one of those games. Target has so many. I don't know if I actually have seen it at Target, but it looks like one of those games you see at Target, and it's like, that can't possibly be good.
I know, right? It's got this lovely illustrated portrait of Jimmy Stewart with the camera, Grace Kelly in the background, and we're both big movie buffs. Christina's a huge movie buff. I'm a huge just Jimmy Stewart fan in general, and Hitchcock. I mean, people who have paid attention to the studio know that I have a giant Vertigo poster just to the right of me. But it was given to me and Christina as a Christmas gift, and we're like, oh, okay. We'll check this out. You know what? We'll give our best James Stewart impressions, and we'll just see how it works. And lo and behold, it's made by Prospero Hall, who's the board game design studio that Funko Games owned.
Gotcha.
And they're the ones who made the Horrified series, among other games. And they were taking modern board game design thought processes and applying them to these universal licenses or other licenses that they might have through Funko, and actually coming up with some really cool stuff. So it's like a semi-cooperative Mysterium, for lack of a better, more applicable comparison. But it's more meta than I expected. One player is the director. You are freaking Alfred Hitchcock, and you are trying to indicate to the viewers, who are the James Stewarts of the group, who are, I guess, just watching all your neighbors and trying to figure out what's going on in their lives, and hopefully cluing them in on specific things about their roles and relationships, though there's a chance that one of them is a murderer, in which case, as the director, to pull it off, you must have them get everything, or essentially everything, right except for the murder, which creates some interesting role reversals from the typical mode that this type of game takes. super interesting, very cheeky, kind of beautiful production, and probably the most unlikely film adaptation to board game in 2022 when it released to pull it off. So I'm excited about it. I'm here for it.
Brad, that's cool. I mean, I think it would be really difficult to make any film from Alfred Hitchcock into a board game, so I'm here for it to be successful.
You could have a pandemic-esque birds game. I think you could pull that off.
You could maybe pull that off.
Yeah. Yeah, let's get Matt Leacock working on his birds adaptation.
Hold on. No. I have dibs. Let me
Okay, you're already on.
I'm in my head. I'm in my board game palace, arranging the rules and the mechanics.
The magic circle is here, and we're ready. Okay,
we're all entering it. Great. Mm-hmm. Well, Rad, I've been sick the last couple of days, which has been good for playing solo games and also Board Game Arena. I've been hopping on there. So I actually have also played Harvest recently on Board Game Arena. I played a couple games of Imperium Horizons today again, just trying out the different factions. It's so weird with the...
Tell me
I would love for it to get out of its own way.
Yeah.
Because I love it so much in spite of itself. And
I know the feeling. I've had that relationship with a couple games and a couple human beings as well, where it's like, why do you do this to yourself? And maybe some authors. Like, sometimes I have that experience with Brandon Sanderson. I'm reading through... the most recent Stormlight book right now. I'm at the very end, and sometimes I'm like, you couldn't help yourself, could you? Like,
you just had to. Yeah. You had
to. So like, what's happening on Horizons where Imperium is just like, how do we make this the most Imperium we could?
So that you don't have to have the giant rulebook on the table when you play solo, in this one, they gave you little cards that are the chart for each individual faction. So they cleared up some table space that it already takes up so much table space, and it cleared up having to have that giant book on it.
Yeah.
Except, you now also have to have the back of the new rulebook that is a trade route table if you're playing with one of the factions that is a trade route as a bot. I just realized today that I don't think that I've played with one of the bots that requires a trade route with the trade route expansion until today, and then I played both of them, or I played against two of the factions, and it just is like, I'm trying not to slam my table because the camera is there, but we got rid of the rule book so it didn't have to be on the table. You put effort into clearing that off the table. Why put that on a card? Why is that not on a card?
I thought you were going to tell me that it was going the Forest Shuffle route. Have you played Forest Shuffle?
No, I have not.
Okay, well, it's a game that, I don't know, it's a wingspan. It's a terraforming Mars. But it has like 13 reference cards, some bananas number of reference cards, and it's a small game, and good on them for trying to condense the rule books to reference cards that you can use, but also an obscene number of reference cards at a certain point just becomes the rule book in a tiny format, which, I thought we did away with those when they were in the like Magic the Gathering little starter decks. I got rid of those with Ice Age. I didn't need them anymore. So maybe we don't need them in Forest Shuffle. But yeah, that is frustrating. Whenever there's a lack of a good reference for an essential material in a game, I've actually found myself making index cards, and I actually picked up a laminator specifically for this. And so it's a fun way to get crafty, having an index card that's a rules reference, and I draw my iconography and illustrate it because I'm a crazy person. But then also, I'll look up BGG frequently asked questions and like anything that I need a clarification on during the first couple of games where it's a minute rule that I'm like, I know I'm going to come back to this. Then I go ahead and put it on there, and now I actually take this to its logical conclusion. I'll laminate it and just keep it in the box. Right now, it's just in the box, but I have that for like, I've done that for Beast. I did that for Keep the Heroes Out. I have a few other games where there's just these little, just rule clarifications that are not perfectly well spelled out, or they just lack the essential rules reference that every game should have.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that it was like 2 steps forward and 1 step back in this case, and it just, yeah, I don't know. I don't know why I expected Imperium Horizons to not take up a bunch of table space. I just should have known.
At this point, as far as the game itself, do you feel that Horizons is the essential release of Imperium, or do you feel like one of the first 2 sets that were simultaneously released would be the better way to go?
I just think that if you're getting into it for the first time, and I'm at some point they're going to put a review together for it, but I think if you're getting into it for the first time, this is the edition I would recommend, just because it has so many improvements to teach players. It has so many improvements to make rules more clear. I think that some of the factions from Imperium Classics are way better to introduce players about how the game works without making it overly complicated.
Right.
Because a lot of the easier... Because every faction has like a rating of 1 to 5 stars of how difficult they are to play. Or complexity. And some of the ones that are like a 1-star complexity in this also require you have the trade routes, and I just think that that's maybe too much to start a player off with. I think they have some that don't involve the trade routes, but I think if you're getting into Imperium, this is probably the edition. There, I have it there.
Yeah,
I got a board game shelf, so now people will know when we record these podcasts that I play board games.
Right, exactly. It's how you demonstrate your, I guess, dominance in the board game space,
yes.
is having a shelf in the background.
Yes.
Tell me about Katmai. You been playing Katmai at all?
I haven't yet. I've been trying to get it to the table. I haven't been able to get 2-player session in for like anything recently. It's been a lot of solo games or board game arena. My wife has just been busy. We've had some stuff going on with getting settled into DC. We also went to Florida for the holidays and then came back, and I think we're both sick, and we're planning on playing something once we are finished recording the podcast. But I think is cuddled up in bed because she did not sleep very well last night. So yep.
Katmai is pretty cool. I have a review for it up now.
Yes, you do.
Well, I guess we have a review up for it now. But I took the opportunity to film it outdoors. That was kind of fun, just to emphasize the Alaskaness of it all. The game is lighter than I expected, but it's still fun. There's some squishiness on some of the victory conditions that you're working towards, that you claim as you play, and there's some weirdness on timing having to do with that. But overall, the game itself is something that's very easy to teach, but gives you a lot of interesting things to think about, especially once you start developing an understanding of what all the cards that are going to be played every round are, aside from the 2 that get set aside. And that gives you, I guess, sort of an understanding of the potential outcomes as you play cards. I like it. I think that for my specific gaming tastes, it's neither as, I guess, like aesthetic and uber efficient as some games that are ultra minimalistic games that I adore, or as deep as other games that I adore. So it kind of straddles this area where it's like, this is enjoyable and it's good on a lot of levels. It's not necessarily excelling to the extent that I think it's going to be an automatic keeper on the horizon in any one of those specific levels, but it's certainly something that I think fits a lot of different zones. So if you had like a smaller collection, it could fit a lot of niches at once. In the face of so many really great games, so many great naturalist themed games, it's hard to compete with something like Harmonies, which we've talked about, I think, on the last two of these podcasts.
You want to go?
So we won't talk about it more.
Run it back. Talk about Harmonies again. 3 times, 3 podcasts in a row.
Yeah, exactly. This is just going to become a dedicated Harmonies fan cast. I think that's what we need to do. No, it's just there are. There's a lot of really great games in that space. Katmai does an admirable job at doing something new. I also like that it's Osprey making it, so it does have that kind of contentious war game element, even if it's a very non-confrontational game in a lot of ways. Reminds me of Knizia's Battle Line, but it's a cool game. Probably the thing that I'm most excited to cover at this point that I haven't started working together a review on is Kinfire Delve, which there are a bunch of Kinfire games. Kinfire Delve is a game that it reminds me a lot of the Set of Watch series, in that it's a minimalistic, cooperative, card-driven, heroic fantasy card game, which is now a very direct comparison, but it gives a lot more distinction between characters and gives you a lot more ownership of the character, such that I wouldn't want to play it solo dual-handed if I were playing it solo, which I have, and I really enjoy it. I like the single-handed single hero and just kind of seeing what they can do as their capabilities, whereas Set of Watch is more about the overall puzzle and combination of characters and doesn't really incentivize multiplayer over single player, whereas this, I feel like there's more of a Spirit Island relationship between the heroes that if you're playing at larger player counts, which each of the boxes has 2 heroes and can only be played as 2 players, but if you have multiple sets, you can combine the heroes and play up to 4. Gives you a more open space to kind of play and deal with the challenges that are in front of you. It's almost like if Set a Watch and Regicide met and then had a Spirit Island baby, and I like it. I like it.
Great. I mean, that sounds awesome. I would be interested in trying it out next time we see each other, but I can maybe also try to get a copy here at some point or another. I mean, I think that all sounds up my alley. I'm interested to see your thoughts on it whenever you get a review together. And yeah, I think the other game that I've played that I just felt was worth mentioning is Turing Machine, which is... The only reason I've played it is because it's on Board Game Arena, and I've been homesick. But it's a game that came out in 2022, but it's more like a logic puzzle than anything. But like one person, I mean, I've only played it on Board Game Arena, so I'm not entirely sure if like a player actually plays as the computer.
But I'm looking it up right now. It's kind of a bananas-looking game.
You get... essentially, whoever is the computer, I assume it's a person, a player, gets a set of numbers and then gets 3 verifiers that the players can verify their guesses with, and you're trying to guess what the set of numbers is in as few guesses as possible. I don't know if I like it or not yet. I've played it like 10 times.
Okay.
All of it is like, well, the games go super fast. The games go super quick. Like, it's a sub 10-minute game.
Yeah. I just love the declaration of, I don't know if I liked it. I played it 10 times. There are people whose favorite game on the planet is a game that they've only played like 5 or 6 times.
You know, I just don't know. It seems like it's a really fun logic puzzle, but I don't know if I like it as a game yet.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that I might think of it as a similar to like how I think of, I enjoy Sudoku, I enjoy crossword puzzles, but I don't know if I necessarily consider those good games because they're less games and more puzzles. And I know that it's hard to draw that distinction of what is a game versus what is a puzzle and all of that. But
well, I think it is hard to draw the distinction. I think it's one of those subjective things that you kind of have to make your own definition on. I mean, yes, you can have a definition of what is a game. And I talked about this on the Lands of Galzir review that is coming up whenever that fits into the production schedule. But there is a sense in a game, as opposed to a puzzle, that there should be some sort of loss condition, like some sort of objective that you're working toward or risk that happens. And in a puzzle, the only risk that you often have is that you just waste a bunch of time realizing you played something that you don't actually enjoy. I don't know. You kind of have to make your own definition, but like, is there a loss condition in it?
So, in theory, the players who are the guessers are all competing to get the answer in as few rounds and guesses as possible, or rounds and clues as possible. You only get one guess, so you have to like do enough to feel confident in your guess is correct, because if you get it wrong, you've lost. But if you guess, if you say that you think you know the answer, but somebody else has already said they think they know the answer and gotten it correct like 2 rounds ago, you've lost. But it all ends up just becoming like, okay, well, I have to do all of the logic puzzling to get it correct that I can.
Yeah.
But then you all just, like, essentially at some point or another, there's just okay, you are able to get it at this stage, or like in this number of guesses, this is the quickest amount of time you can get it. That is that. So I don't know. It's a little bit like if you play like the New York Times crossword and you compete against your friends for like to do it the fastest. That's kind of how it feels like. So I'm not sure if I like it as a game yet. It is fun. It's fun as like a quick little, I have 2 minutes to burn. Let me see if I can figure out what 3 numbers these are. But yeah, I've played that quite a bit. I was also trying to bump up I realized that I have a Board Game Arena account that I've played a lot of things on that isn't my premium account. And then I have my premium account, which I will be perfectly honest, I didn't know I had. I guess I signed up for it at some point or another. And I've just been getting charged for it. But that one I haven't played enough games on.
You
to
just
change my avatar.
Don't ever worry about the monthly fee there.
I feel like I'm generally pretty good at keeping up on those things, but clearly I'm not because I found this out. But my premium one, I haven't played. You have to play 20 games total to change your avatar. And so I was like, well, I play like some really quick games so that I can bump my player count up, so that I can change my avatar.
That's sounding like me in, I don't know, 2009 hunting achievements on the Xbox 360.
Yeah.
Like, playing the Avatar: The Last Airbender Xbox game because you heard that you can get 1,000 achievement points in about 10 minutes, so you just knock those out really quick. That's a great reason to play games, but not entirely unheard of. I mean, recently I was looking at my gameplay stats for the year, and I had some great stats to look at. Of like, I played a lot of games that I'm really happy about getting time in with, especially some older games. But my favorite game, Spirit Island, I only had 7 plays in 2024 because it's competing with everything else. And I was like, oh man, I only have like 10 days left in 2024. I want to get this up to 10. Not because I was doing a 10 by 10 challenge. I have great admiration for people who do that. I think that's a really smart thing to do to appreciate the games that you have. It's not always something that works for my lifestyle, and I get a lot of games played, period. So I'm not too worried about making sure that I have specific games played. Yeah. But this is one where I was like, oh, let's bump it up to 10. And we were able to do it in the 11th hour. I guess December 30th is when we got our 10th game played. And it was after our Monday night board game night where we were at Devil's Club here in Juneau. Played the public game night, and then Christina and I got home and we're like, we have a New Year's Eve party to get to tomorrow. So this is kind of our only chance because we're both working tomorrow. All right, well, it's 9:30 on a work night. Let's get it on the table. We cranked it out. We decided to play on the natural side of the island, so it's a little bit more difficult. But we played with low complexity spirits that we hadn't played with in a long time. And just kind of saw what a vanilla run with them would be. It was fun. It was a little challenging until it became an absolute domination because we weren't playing with any ratcheted up difficulty from adversaries. Yeah. And it was great. We brought in the new year with some Spirit Island, which is, as far as I can tell, one of the best ways of finishing out your December. But we're here to actually talk about a topic, right? We have
we're moving out of December.
For topics and stuff on this podcast. We're not just talking about games we played.
Not just talking about games we played. We're moving out of December, and with that, I thought it would be fun to take a look at what the board game industry looks like in 2025, and maybe make some guesses as to what trends we're going to see and what trends that are already in talks, how those are going to affect the board game industry. Right. I think I've read a lot of interviews from different board game executives about their outlook on 2025, and the big thing that keeps coming up is proposed tariffs with the new administration. And I think that is a really intriguing topic of how does that affect the board game industry. And I think that the concern so far is that board games are already a luxury product, and like they're a thing that nobody in theory needs. Like they're not food or water, things that will keep you alive. They are a entertainment luxury product, and with new tariffs, those are going to become board games are just going to become more likely expensive to produce and get into the US, which means that those prices are probably going to go to the consumer. That's at least, I think, a lot of the big concern.
So help me with some of the logistics here, because as a layman, like I'm no expert in bird law, but as far as I can tell, board game manufacturing is predominantly handled in China, and tariffs in theory are where you have a fee that goes to imported goods from other countries with the hope of gaining additional revenue for the federal government based off of those fees, which will then encourage local production rather than subsidizing local production. You're just making it more expensive to produce from the exterior. But when you are, say, a board game company that's based in the US, but your manufacturing happens in China because that's the only way to realistically make a board game in 2025. And you've already set up the production to happen based off of, say, Kickstarter backers that happened in a Kickstarter that occurred in 2023 or 2024. And so you have a certain pool of money based off of the expected cost of these goods coming in. And then you have a tariff that dramatically increases the anticipated cost to the publisher. And that publisher is left to decide, well, do I just eat this? And then, like, depending on the size of the publisher or what their profit margins were on the individual products or whatever, if they can even afford to eat it, or their decision is, do I pass this on to the consumer? One way or another, we're looking at the long-term possibility of, if these tariffs are applied against these imports, that the expectation is likely board games will go up in price to the consumer to offset the anticipated costs. It's not that the actual production is getting any more expensive. It's that there is no board game manufacturing industry in America as an alternative. And that would take a dramatic change in American industry to be able to accommodate that. So instead, it's much more likely that we should just expect that it costs more out of pocket to the consumer. Is that kind of like...
Yeah, for a person who's not an expert in bird law, you put that very eloquently. Yeah, that is a lot of the assumption is that board game manufacturing has already started moving out of China, some into Europe, some into the USA, but it is still almost entirely based in China. So the fact that there is going to be tariffs on board games coming in probably means that those prices are... the margins are already so thin on a lot of board games that there's not enough wiggle room to just eat that cost for most people. Now, there are board game manufacturers in Europe, there are board game manufacturers in the USA that are slowly moving. I mean, I think that is the intended effect of these tariffs, is to move manufacturing out of China and into Europe and the USA. But just where we are right now is there's not... like, it will take... I think the numbers I've been seeing are like 7 to 10 years to like build a factory or a series of factories that can do what is expected here to just keep up with the pace of board game manufacturing. And I think that it is going to be some much higher prices on board games that you... I mean, we already had jump in board game prices that has kind of subsided a bit, but during COVID, when the shipping costs for everything went up,
right,
that's going to be something similar. I know a couple
of years ago, Asmodee announced like a big, broad increase on a lot of their evergreen titles, like almost across the board $10 retail increase, which, for a lot of people, $10 might be like, is that big of a deal? But from a percentage standpoint, that's, if it's a $50 game, what is that, 20% increase on the retail costs is pretty substantial. And that's for one of the biggest board game businesses out there. And what I find so interesting about this hobby in general, and one of the things I've always found the most interesting about gaming, is that it's a community driven thing. It's, something that people become very passionate and dedicated in their pursuit of, from an amateur, almost grassroots standpoint. Yes, there are extremely savvy business people who get into this space. I think like Jamie Stegmaier is a great example of someone who became a board game fan, but was very thoughtful about business and how they wanted to approach it, and found a way to balance that sort of obsessive love and dedication to this hobby with the business aspect. But more often than not, there are so many people out there who it's just their dream to make a board game, not to make a profitable business. And so the margins for a lot of these publishers is very narrow, just so they can get to the point of actually delivering games to people. Maybe they have hopes of becoming larger businesses that are self-sustaining, where people don't have to have side gigs and everything, but it's going to, I think, crush those sorts of small businesses that are, people who are just trying to fulfill their dream, have a side gig, get their games produced and played, and it's only going to let the, much more savvy, much more business-minded personnel in the industry thrive, which a lot of those people are fantastic. Like, we need really profitable companies to legitimize this. But I would be sad if, that whole section of the convention that's, the small, weird, little guys, so to speak, doesn't have the way of making their weird little games affordable enough that people will take a chance on it. Because it's just so expensive for them to make any sort of reasonable profit.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that it's going to be tougher to make a board game just in general. Like, it is going to be tougher to find a way to make your board game profitable in a way that will make people buy it still. I think that's something to just, be concerned with. And then another thing that has been brought up is, and this is less of a board game specific thing and more just, if in theory tariffs are put into place as they have been predicted or said they will be, prices on a lot of things are going to go up.
Right.
Like a lot of things that are just standard cost of living. I mean, I know that in Juneau we already have like pretty, or I say we as if I still live there, but Juneau has like pretty
here in heart
exorbitant grocery store prices on like fruits and things that are like, because we have to take so much cost in transporting them to Juneau. And I think that there's going to be a lot of things that those prices are going to go up for a lot of things coming out of China and Asia. And that just means that board games, which are a luxury good, now have to eat a smaller percentage of a person's paycheck because they have to spend more on other things.
Yeah, and it's also going to, I'm just thinking this through now, there's already a very considerable incentive to buy from discounted online retailers like Amazon, for example.
Yeah.
And right now, if I want to buy a board game, I happen to have a really great store near my office. I can go in there, I can find it and buy it and feel like I'm helping a local game store and that, I'm helping my community and everything. But the more that these games end up costing and the more that people have economic pressure on them, then they're going to have to turn to places that can have those deeper cuts, the discounts and everything. And so it's incentivizing going to things like Amazon, which this has been talked about for various industries ad nauseum, and is just kind of like that late stage capitalism. We live in a fallen world, and we have no choice but to pursue this only outlet for so many of our luxury goods, and I guess necessary goods, as more people are turning to stuff like Amazon. I mean, heck, I'm worried about Juneau as a community because we are so dependent on something like Amazon, even for basic things like furniture.
Yeah.
It's crazy the level of dependence that we're getting on this, and I think we're going to see that more and more in our space. But what is the alternative, I guess? I don't know that we're going to have any solutions on this podcast, but it's, I guess, important to think about what are the things that like either we as gamers, as consumers, can do, or what we can help promote, or try to take in mind as we're purchasing games, or supporting or voting with our wallets, or voting in general.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that the caveat to all of this is we don't know how these tariffs are actually going to be enacted. We don't know how they're going to be put into place.
Right.
So, and I am, even though I'm in DC, do not know nearly enough to make any claims about the likelihood of what those are going to look like. But I think, making sure that you, as much as possible, are supporting your friendly local gaming store, like, though the brick and mortar stores are going to feel it for the exact reasons you said, of there are so many online retailers who are able to provide much more substantial discounts, and as much as possible, I think that making sure that your money is staying in your community, making sure that you are supporting the local businesses, is always typically pretty good. Like, with the speed of money, you want it to stay in your community so it continues supporting your community. But at the same time, I think that it is going to be much tougher for consumers to do that, because it is just going to be, prices are going to go up. Another thing I think to just take note of, and this is a little bit on consumers and a little bit on how board games, I think, are going to end up hitting the market, and this is a quote from James Naylor of Back Office Games. I got this quote from a interview he did on Board Game Wire, but he is expecting fewer, better games. Like, he thinks that there are going to be fewer games hitting the market, but there are going to be games that are more likely to be hits. And I think that, especially with the new, like, financial troubles that could come from if you have a board game that you put out that is a flop, you've already paid to get it into the US. I think that there are going to be, I think that quote and that prediction does, in my opinion, hold some weight of validity. That there will just be maybe more focus from some of the bigger studios to make sure they have like 4 or 5 really good games come out, as opposed to taking chances on some of the smaller things that they have coming.
I'm of two minds about this. I mean, on the one hand, I totally agree that every company should be trying always to make the best thing that they can. On the other hand, I don't necessarily think that the most marketable thing is always the best thing as well, right? And this is something that we see in the, like in the film industry, for example. Like, at a certain point, if there is so much economic pressure to always have a success that is monumental, then you're only going to have Marvel movies and DC movies and, like...
Well, not DC movies.
Well...
Just Marvel movies.
I didn't say good movies. I said movies that make money, and for some reason, DC was continuing to make money.
Are they?
I don't know. Zack Snyder was continuing to get jobs for some reason. He really has a great depth of field. We were talking about depth of field earlier today.
On
great
point.
Depth of field.
That time that he talked to a comedian.
Depth of field.
Great.
and that Dawn of the Dead remake, stupendous. It was great. That was great. But the I worry that the weird, cute, strange games aren't going to get made. On the other hand, I also feel kind of exhausted by the totality of the industry sometimes, right? Like those weird booths that I go to and find strange games, those aren't always the bangers that, I talk about on the top 10 games of the year, right? Some of them are, but those are also the ones that generally get the biggest attention, or at least sustainable attention. Whereas the weird, obscure little games are not always the ones that end up being the most memorable. And even if they are really good games, the lack of polish that a smaller company is able to put into it, I'm often like, I wish it had, better art, or that it had, better materials or whatever. So I agree, we're probably going to get fewer but more polished games. I just don't want to see the innovation and the spirit of ingenuity within our industry getting strangled.
Yeah, and I think that's something to be concerned with. I actually had a thought about this for something that we had, I think later on, but I think that it doesn't necessarily seem likely that licensed games that have like an established following, because I'm thinking of it coming from like, I have a film background, and like a lot of films that have like a dedicated following will get greenlit before other films. Like I think that a lot of films that have like the amount of budget that live action Disney movies are getting, one, because it's Disney, two, because people know what Snow White is, they know what Beauty and the Beast is, like they know what that franchise is, and they will go see that in theaters with the intended audience. Like they have to put so much fewer dollars into marketing, and I don't think that is necessarily going to happen with the board game industry, but it is a thing that I just could see becoming more of a norm, of like having these bigger franchises or things. Like video game adaptions are like doing particularly well, I think, at least recently, with Slay the Spire, Dead Cells the board game. There's a Don't Starve the board game coming out that I found out about today that I am interested in. I love Don't Starve, but I think that like those types of followings where it's, these people are gamers, they might not be board gamers, but they might be willing to try a board game of a franchise they really enjoy.
You got Stardew Valley on your shelf right back there. I mean,
I do, even though it's not very good and it's unfortunate.
I mean, it's fine.
It's fine. It's fine. I would like it to be better.
I think it misses the sort of granular economic thrust of Stardew Valley and leans heavily into the cozy whimsy of Stardew Valley, which
but it also doesn't. Like, it also is like very frantically paced. It is a very frantic board game. It is like White Castle level of you have to be as efficient as possible with your actions to even come close to winning.
Right.
And
but it doesn't also give you the leverage to really dive into those systems in as granular way. Like it doesn't allow you to explore in the way that Stardew Valley, the video game, lets you explore the systems. But that's a conversation for a whole other time.
Let's bring it back on topic.
I see what you're saying, that licensed adaptations would be a good route to attract an audience, because you have the people who are just interested in that as a whole. I mean, we saw, as far as trends for 2025, I think we'll continue to see some more video game adaptations, more licensed product adaptations. Like this year, we had the release of Mass Effect, the cooperative board game, which is actually pretty cool. I want to get some more time in with that and have something on the channel or talk about it on upcoming podcasts, but I've only played one game with that so far. We had a couple Lord of the Rings games come out this year, or I guess the Fellowship of the Ring trick-taking game is a 2025 release. Just I got my hands on it a little bit early. And we're going to see more things like Dune Imperium, I anticipate, will get more of that type of thing where big blockbuster movie tie-ins or big name stuff. Star Wars is inevitably going to get more stuff associated with it. I think that's one, it's cashing in on the casual audience who might not otherwise be that immersed in board games. That might be an entry point for them. You kind of have the built-in audience. And then two, I think if you're savvy about it or lazy, I think there's a thin line at the precipice between savvy and lazy. You can save a lot of time on assets, like you don't have to think about a thematic conceit for an intellectual property as much when you already have it built in. What does Batman do? Okay, there you go. You can use pre-existing artwork. You can commission new artwork, and that's great when it happens, but you can use pre-existing artwork if necessary. There's a lot of advantages to using license adaptations, and I am at least encouraged to see that a lot of them recently have been pretty dang good.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it has been encouraging to see. I still haven't I haven't played Mass Effect. I haven't played Slay the Spire, which that one is probably when we were at PAX Unplugged, that board game was everywhere. So many people had purchased it and were carrying it around I didn't get a chance to play it, even though I love the app. That would be something that I would be interested in giving a shot when I get the chance. But it does seem like those are all getting reasonably good reviews. So maybe there's something to it of, I think having games that have such a established following already means that you really hopefully want to do right by it. And I guess we can only hope that if there are going to be more licensed franchised games, that they will be true to the original source material.
If there was an indie darling video game, board game adaptation, an unlikely adaptation that you would love to see, that you would have no ability to resist picking up a copy of, regardless of reviews of the game, what is it?
Indie darling, my heart's saying Pokemon.
The more
indie
obscure
Pokemon
and weird tie-in, the better. I have mine ready, and that would be Papers, Please.
That could be fun.
Yeah, a Papers, Please board game at first sounds ridiculous, but then I think there's actually a really great way that you could probably do that. In fact, I would be surprised if that doesn't exist.
Maybe.
What's this? I'm okay. There is Please, Papers by designer Joel Eddy.
Your cousin.
Yeah. And
that came out in 2019.
An inspired by adaptation of the game.
Is it a print and play? It's a print and play.
Yep.
I have a thought that is, I don't know if they're considered indie or not, but I know that they just have revamped and are intending on releasing more of these video games. I would love a backyard baseball board game.
That'd be cool.
Humongous Entertainment has been I don't know if they were purchased, but they opened up a shop recently, and they have announced they're going to release some more backyard games. And I feel like the Baseball Manager video game that exists is very popular, and I could see that being translated. But I think with like the wacky world of backyard sports, that could be a fun playground to exist in.
You know, what's a genre of board game that I have never found one that really delivers on my love of the genre of video game is there have been several attempts at either direct adaptations or inspired adaptations of fighting video games, and I've never found one that really kind of like has the vibe of a Street Fighter, a Mortal Kombat, a Samurai Showdown, or even like a Smash Brothers or something that really delivers on that. Probably the closest has been Bushido, which was by Gray Fox Games, and that was really good. But that is a little tangential to the whole thing. It is a very good 2-player game, and it definitely is inspired by Bushido Blade on the PlayStation, an old Squaresoft game, but that was like a 3D fighting game. It wasn't what we think of as like the prototypical Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat dueler. So
I'm trying to think
I'd
the
like to
Shadow
see something
Puppet
like that.
board game that we saw at the Asmodee PowerPoint. That looked really cool, and I think that it could fill that gap for you. But I agree, there haven't been any that in that genre that have like even come close to landing.
Well,
yeah, fingers crossed.
What else for 2025? Do you have any other thoughts or like anticipations for the hobby, or like even your own personal consumption of games in 2025? Or
I think
ambitions?
I'm gonna play more games this year. That's always the hope, but I think this year it could actually come true. I mean, it might come true. I don't have my Friday lunch date with you anymore, so I have lost that like very confirmed. I play board games at minimum once a week through that, but I think that I have more. I guess just more random board game nights that happen somewhere in DC that I can just poke my head into. And then now that I know the Winsmith Games guys from PAX Unplugged, I can maybe pop in with them. I think
weren't JFK and Henry Kissinger really into playing diplomacy?
I really don't want to be involved with Henry Kissinger if I can avoid it.
Okay. Henry Kissinger described diplomacy as his favorite game, as him and John F. Kennedy's favorite game. So what I'm saying is I think you need to find like a Secretary of State or something in D.C. to start a board game night with.
I don't want to play diplomacy with Henry Kissinger's ghost. Jack.
I mean, it'd make good footage for the channel. Come on.
You can't capture him on
What are we
film.
doing here?
He's
Content creation.
You probably can't capture him on film. It's unclear. But yeah, I think that there are a lot of games I'm excited about that are coming out that are like seem up my alley. I think the one that I'm just most intrigued by, or I guess the two that I'm most intrigued by, because they're both they're both sci-fi themed, is Crafting the Cosmos, which we saw at the Asmodee thing, and then Galactic Cruise. Worker placement of like 1950s spaceship tourism. Sure, that seems weird enough for me. I'm here for it. Those are two games that I'm interested in. I think Molly House is definitely high on my list. There's a lot of games that I think are really interesting that have already been announced that I'm excited to try, and so I think that maybe a bit more than this time last year, there's more on the horizon that I'm excited to try.
Yeah, I think as far as my own gaming, I'm going to attempt to be more experimental in my gaming, to like try things that are outside of my wheelhouse. I mean, I'm not particularly picky in general. I'm one of those like omni gamers, but starting to look for more experiences that are outside of what I've been playing over the last couple of years. And even though we've been out of COVID lockdown for a while now, I think the pace of that lockdown, emphasizing either playing a lot of solo games or playing a lot of 1v1 partner games, or just like 2-player games with a partner. I'm starting to come out of that shell, and while this has been an absolute stunning year in terms of 2-player games, and I anticipate that there's going to continue to be that trend. If anything, it'll be like when there were a couple roll-in rights like Welcome to and No Siesta and I guess Cartographers. Like these roll and writes and flip and writes came out and they became big pillars, and then suddenly there was just like an onslaught of all these games. I anticipate that there's going to be a similar 2-player thing. We're already starting to see it. We had the Patchworks and the Seven Wonders duels, and then we had Splendor duel, and now we're getting dual everything. But this year had some really interesting dedicated 2-player games that weren't adaptations of previous release games. It wasn't Seven Wonders duel. It was Kelp. We had Pagan, we had Ironwood, games that were from the ground up, not resting on the laurels of a pre-existing release, but still very popular, very flashy, very interesting 2-player games. I think we'll just kind of continue to see every publisher out there going, we need a new 2-player game. It needs to be on the shelf. We need that as part of our catalog.
Well, and I think that comes from, at least in my mind, that comes from COVID. That comes from people who are designing board games. That's who they're, 2 players were the only ones they could playtest. And I think
of all the poor partners out there where, a frothy husband or wife or girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever was like, I have no one else to play with, and so now you must be the one to play with me, and it was like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to sit down and play your geeky stuff with you. I
think we definitely had, when Mim and I both had COVID, we play tested Mount Olympus a lot that week.
Yep.
That week and a half.
But what I guess I was getting at is I had a very tight game group that did include other people, but my most reliable gaming was with Christina, and part of that was COVID, and part of that was having a younger child. And now, with us having more public game nights and going on more trips to conventions and doing that kind of thing, and our child is older, so either he can join in on the games or he doesn't need our constant supervision, that gives us a lot more flexibility to participate in things that aren't dedicated 2-player games, like those games that I always looked at that were like minimum 3 players over the last few years, where I was like, I don't know that I want to cover that because I don't know how reliably I'm going to get a few games in at more than 3 players. Suddenly I'm like, sure, minimum 3 players, I can get that to the table. I'll find a way to get that played.
Crescent Moon gonna get a review?
Yeah, we could get Crescent Moon in here.
4-player game.
Yeah, that's still a bonkers thing.
Do you have that? Did I give that back to you?
I don't know. I'll have to look.
I don't recall.
Yeah,
I don't recall what happened to it. I don't have it now. It's gone now. That was one that this was like when I first was like just even slightly helping out with the channel. You were like, if you just, I don't want to learn the rules. You read the rules. Let me know if it's worth playing. Teach me the rules if we get to that point.
Minimum 4-player game, maximum 5-player game, right? It was like a 4 to 5,
and the 5th player was like, if you had a 5th player, they just started. They were like playing, but really they were just betting on who else was going to win, and if they happened to win, then they would win. So it was really, I think saying 5 players is generous. That was a 4-player game. It was 4-player only, not. Yeah.
Right. Well, I think it's going to be a good year. It's going to be an interesting year, and no matter what, we have a lot of games that just came out, which I feel like I'm still catching up on.
Yeah.
But there's some cool stuff. You already mentioned Molly House. I'm really excited about Tend, which I already got a chance to play, but the finished version will be really cool. There's a Kickstarter game I backed a while ago, which should be delivering, which is Deep Regrets. And that was one of the first publishers that I saw talking about the implications of tariffs, because that was a new publisher. And they were talking about, well, thanks to the success of the campaign, we'll be able to just kind of eat these costs. But as far as whether or not we can continue as a company after that, we'll see. So we're all kind of waiting in the wings to see what this looks like. But I'm excited and optimistic about 2025 as a gaming year, and I certainly think that like my own personal gaming is going to be maybe a little bit branching out, a little more adventurous.
Yeah. Right.
I did get one question to wrap things up here. And we got a question in relation to the Kelp video. Tommy Torres had asked me, what are my favorite... here it is. I gotta find it. What are your favorite hidden movement games, since you referenced a bunch without giving any titles in the introduction? I guess that's slightly post the puppet show introduction for that video. But so I mentioned in there that it's one of my favorite genres of games. I have a deep personal connection to it. I kind of have like a fraught relationship to my deceased mother, but my earliest gaming memory and one of my positive memories with my mom was sitting on her lap while she was playing and kind of letting me play with her Scotland Yard, which is the reference of Mr. X. You're hunting Mr. X. My brother was Mr. X. My mom and I were hunting him as Scotland Yard. I think I mentioned Fury of Dracula, and then Beast gets a reference, and I had a few more in there. Mind Management, and Whitehall / Whitechapel. I don't know. Are you a hidden movement guy? Like, do you like deception and deduction?
I generally like deduction, but I'm not typically drawn towards that in board games. So I have played hidden movement games. I think that I have fun with them, but I'm not typically compelled to go out and buy them right away. At the same time, if they can nail it, it is typically a great game. Like, for example, I love Treasure Island. That is hidden information. It's not necessarily hidden movement, but it is like, oh, how much information do I want to give out? Or if you're the one seeking, is like, okay, based on what they've said, what can I rule out? And I think that there's a lot of things in that game that I love. Beast was awesome. I've only played it, I think I played it once with you, and I had a awesome time. That was a really interesting game. I wanted to play it on the B side, but I'll wait for that to
for another time.
For another time. But yeah.
One I didn't reference, which is one of my favorites, but it's a little bit more obscure, is especially interesting because we had River of Gold come out, which is based in the Legend of the Five Rings universe. There was a hidden movement board game called Ninja, the Legend of the Scorpion Clan, which used the Legend of the Five Rings IP. I want to say it came out like 10 years ago or something. It was an AEG game, so it predates the license going over to Asmodee. So I don't think you can really get your hands on it anymore, but it was a very cool 1v1 hidden movement game where one player is trying to infiltrate as a hidden person going in and trying to secure an objective, whereas the other person is using a multitude of guards with some gamey effects where they can listen and have positional awareness. It kind of reminded me of almost like a Metal Gear Solid type of thing, or, like a Splinter Cell type of thing, where you really had to rely on the mechanics of a multitude of individuals on either end, one person being the player who, is the board, is the obstruction, is all of the guards and all the elements, and then the other player being the hidden figure trying to infiltrate and succeed. It's a game I played to death, and I absolutely loved it. And I would love to see like another release of it. I mean, hey, FFG, Asmodee, get on top of it. 2-player games are hot, and you're working with that Legend of the Five Rings license. So let's see if the Scorpion clan can rise again with Ninja. I'd love to see it again. So that's another cut.
We have guaranteed at least one Asmodee employee has listened to this podcast.
Yeah, that is true.
The chances are at least very slightly better than 0% that this rant will get it published.
Yeah. So that's our answer for today. But if you have any questions for us about tariffs, or you have questions about 2025 or anything in general, something for us to talk about, then you can email us at cardboardherald@gmail.com, or I guess otherwise comment on something.
Comment on the YouTube video if you're watching it there.
Yeah.
Or wherever your heart tells you to communicate with us. Find us. Go to Jack's house.
Go to Jack's house. Go to Eric's house in DC. Step in on him playing games with Henry Kissinger's ghost.
No, I don't want to play with Henry Kissinger's ghost. My wife would be so mad at me.
I have a feeling that you're going to wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat, and Kissinger is going to be looming over you in a ghostly glow.
Telling me to develop nations that don't want to be developed.
Yes, exactly.
Go now. All right, that seems like a really good way to wrap up the podcast. That was my Henry Kissinger impression. I know that we've all wanted to hear it for a while. There it is. And that seems like as good a point as any to wrap up this podcast. Thank you so much for listening. I have been Eric.
I've been Jack.
With the Cardboard Herald podcast. Thank you for listening. Have a great rest of your day.
Later.